Good morning, welcome to parallel session 2, which is on science communication. And as you may have noticed from the agenda, this session is divided into two parts. The first part will focus more on the institution side, the point of view of institutions on science communication. And the second part, this afternoon at 5, will focus on the point of view. We look at science communication from the point of view of organizations that work in science communication, in citizen science, and citizens involved in science communication and citizen science. Let me read something to start, just to frame this session into two parts. So in 1985, this is something very famous within science communication, well known. In 1985, the Royal Society published a report, the Bodmer report. It's called the Bodmer report. The official title is The Public Understanding of Science. At one point in the report, I quote, the report says that scientists must learn to communicate with the public, be willing to do so, and indeed consider it their duty to do so. All scientists need, therefore, to learn about the media and their constraints and learn how to explain science simply, without jargon, and without being condescending. Now, the vocabulary might be a bit strong in a way. Let's face it, at least it's quite strong, but it's also 1985. Why science communication? Well, most was already said in this quote. In this quotation, there is an importance, a real value for science and for society in science communication. And let me say something that may be obvious. The COVID-19 pandemic made really evident the importance of science communication, the difference between science communication and lack of communication of science, or bad science communication. There is also bad science communication because all of us, we need to learn how to do it. And that's why, for example, yesterday as MCAA, we held a workshop from 9 a.m. until 7 p.m., a training workshop, a hands-on training on science communication, because it's something that we learn. It's a skill. It's a set of skills. So there is a great value. As MCAA, we really believe in science communication. Let me just conclude before giving the floor to our speakers, giving you a quick overview of what, as MCAA, we try to do, have been trying to do. We have probably, let me say this, Fernanda Bajanca, the chair, is here. Let me say this, I think I will not be, I'm not saying something false when I say that the working group on science communication is one of the most active, let's say, if not the most active. And it's crucial within the MCAA. It's run entirely by volunteers, that not only communicate our activities, but promote science communication as a set of skills, and there is a sort of internal training of our members, of the Science Communication Working Group. We publish a newsletter, a magazine, which you will see around, and a blog. And over the past few years, we decided that it's not just a newsletter where we put things, as a value, of course, but put things about our association. Yes, we decided to make it an outlet where members can publish short articles for a wider audience about their projects or other scientific topics, which is also why those publications are registered as proper journals, have an ISS numbers. the most recent one, last month, we were able to register the blog as a peer review venue for science communication. So this is something that we really believe in. Now, this is kind of also why we think it's important that we have this double session today. So let's start with the point of view of institutions and see, let's start from the research executive agency and Maria Carvalho Diaz. Maria, are you online?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but not see you on the screen. Now we can. That's perfect.
Okay.
So, Maria, thank you very much for accepting our invitation. And
I hope the background is okay, because sometimes there is an issue with the mirroring, but I did try to put the background of your conference. It's okay? Good.
It's good. It's good. So let me introduce Maria. Maria Carvalho Diaz is a research program officer in the European Research Executive Agency. In the service dealing with the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions Program, the postdoctoral fellowship, more precisely. And she's currently dealing with several projects on in life science and with a approach on science communication, dissemination and exploitation matters. And before joining the Research Executive Agency, she has also worked in communication, if I understood that well. So there is also a practice experience, not only the policy experience. Maria, thank you very much again. Your floor is yours. If you can share your presentation.
Thank you. So I would start by saying that, well, you already said a lot of things that are very important. So it's the obligation that we have and also the joy that we have in communicating what we are doing with our projects and with the funds that we get. So this is very important. Another thing, just talking about myself, for many, many years, I was on your side. So before I joined the institutions, I'm not going to say dates, if not you'll realize how old I am. But for many, many years, I worked from your side. I worked from the university side, from the research institutions organization side, and helping researchers to apply to EU fundings. And then I had already a big career in the European Union, in the Commission, in different types of programs, from research infrastructures to socioeconomic research to SMEs, and now most recently in the last 6 years with Marie Skłodowska-Curie, more precisely in postdoctoral fellowships. So I also did some journalism, but many, many years ago. So when I was invited to speak for science communication, I was a little bit worried because, all these move so quickly that I thought, I must be a bit outdated. But then we realized that it was more that I was going to speak more about the point of view of the projects and of the obligations and so on. Can you see my screen, my presentation? You can see my presentation? Yeah. Okay. So I start, if I look sometimes a bit up, is because the presentation is in the screen up. So I'm not looking to go up, I'm looking into the presentation. So I'll start by saying the obvious. Why is it important to communicate? First, we have to raise awareness on how the European Union research and innovation influences the lives of citizens and helps in answering some of the questions and delivering for all the priorities of the European Union. We also have an obligation to present Europe as a world key player on research and innovation. As you know, well, there is always this kind of competition between United States, Japan, and Europe. And we hope and we are getting into being more and more important with our role. We also want to demonstrate that EU projects do advance knowledge and that sometimes they can help giving solutions to some of the challenges we are facing in Europe and in this world. So we have to show also the added value. We are talking here about public money that is put into the hands of research projects. So citizens, they should understand that this money is not just being thrown out. On the other hand, also research and science is still being seen by many as something a bit weird, where there are these crazy people either looking into black holes that can one day engulf us all, or exploding things in laboratories. But whilst in some areas it's quite easy to understand, like for instance when there was the COVID problem with vaccines and so on, in other areas is a little bit more difficult. And I would like to just share with you what I shared many years ago already, when we're talking about material science. So for someone in the streets, why are we funding research being done in synchrotrons and in all these places with difficult names? And what does this serve for? And basically, I just gave this example of a terrace, of a cafe terrace of people sitting outside and with arrows that were just pointing into for instance, the portable phones, or the tables, or the glasses of the people, or the knees of the people, because behind all these materials research, there are prostheses, materials that are good for prostheses. There are the optical research. There is the materials for tables, for whatever. So just to give you an example, um, let's try and make things simple for the people out there now. And what do you gain as beneficiaries by communicating? You are gaining not only visibility for the project activities, but you are also enhancing your reputation as a researcher, if you're doing something individually, but as for your team and for the organization with whom you're working. You are also supporting the spread of knowledge. And so by spreading the knowledge starts building up, and more knowledge is key to get some more answers to some of our problems. Also, as a project or as a researcher, if you are more visible and if you enhance your reputation, you are better position to get more funding or to get more business opportunities. So now it's a bit of a boring part, but I wanted to have it, and I shared the slides, and I suppose they will be shared with you. I want to give you the legal basis and what is written in the different parts about the obligations of communication. So on Horizon Europe Model Grant Agreement, you have the Article 17th, where which sets the obligation for the beneficiaries to promote the action and the results. Okay? In terms of communication, dissemination, and giving visibility, of course. I'm not going to read all of these. You have the links, you have the number of the article. Then you have here the legal basis also for Horizon 2020, because there are many projects that are still Horizon 2020. So the Article 29 and 28 on dissemination and exploitation, the Article 38 in communication. You have the link to the Model Grant Agreement. And then, as I said, for the Horizon Europe, you have Article 16 with intellectual property rights, background and results, access rights and rights of use, Article 17 on communication dissemination, with the Annex 5 that has lots of special rules on these. Also, and again, boring, but just to set the basis for all these discussions and the legal basis, there are also the rules for participation on Horizon Europe that also speak about exploitation and dissemination, and uh, and where it's set down what are the rules for participating in terms of exploitation and dissemination. So Don't forget that when you are communicating or disseminating or exploiting results, many times you have to have a disclaimer where you say that this is funded by the European Union, but the views and opinions expressed are however, those of the authors, and they don't always necessarily reflect the views of the European Union or the granting authority. And this is important for you to understand. So you are free, but that doesn't mean you are free even to communicate or to disseminate something that might, in your results, might have something that looks like if it's going against what are the policies of the European Union or what's being said. But for that, you have, of course, to use the disclaimer because it's the project's or the author's opinions. Okay, so this is also very important. Now, um, definitions of the differences between communication, dissemination, exploitation. So, communication is to promote the project, and the action is to understand, to take it closer to the citizen. So you have to 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 find what is your target audience for this. Don't forget that every time you communicate, you can't just do something and think this is going to reach everybody. No. Do you want to reach school students, university students? Do you want to reach more the public in large, but through some type of high-ranking newspapers, or is it more at the popular level? So you have to adjust then the message that you are sending, making it appropriate to the public that you chose. So these are means of communications, media, social media, radio, television, science fairs, for instance, and so on. Then dissemination. Dissemination is more thinking about your peers, so about people that are going to understand the scientific parts of your projects. But you have also different parts, because you have the dissemination that goes to a wider range of people, like policymakers, like scientists that are not really only specialists in that niche area. And this, of course, has to be in a language that is more understood for these people, or you are really targeting the people that do the same type of research as you, your peers in the research area. So what we want is that the knowledge circulates, and the knowledge arrives into different types of audiences that afterwards. So, and this is done by publishing articles, by putting our data in databases, by sharing information in different types of conferences or workshops, being either more scientific, niche area oriented, or more large area, as I spoke. So, and then you can exploit those results. So imagine, an exploitation of results doesn't mean only results that can be taken into the market in terms of being commercialized. It can be also exploitation of results by civil societies, by policymakers, by different organizations, nursing associations. I don't know. So giving you, it's not only bringing things, prototypes, having prototypes, patenting them or whatever, and bringing things to the market. So this is very important to understand when we're talking about exploitation of results. You have to have a type of business plan that you can show it something, you can call it something else, but a plan. And then you can have patents or not. Then you have not such large conferences, but more workshops where you can discuss with the other people the results, and how can they be put in practice, like for creation of new legislation and so on. So now this slide, I'm not going to go through this because you interrupt me if I'm going too far, but this is just a definition what we mean, the legal people behind writing all these documents that you get, what is meant by results. And you can see that you have project results in the middle, and you have different types of audiences: the research communities, the policymakers, the industry or innovators, and the civil society and citizens, and different type of how the results can be turned into either policy recommendation, educational materials, prototype software, publications, and so on. Then, so in a nutshell, here we give you an idea about what is the objective of communication, dissemination, exploitation, what is the focus, and what is the target audience. I'm not taking too long on this because I don't want to go too far, but it's for your information, and this can help many times when you're thinking what you want to do, to just frame your action and have in mind if your action, and of course communication dissemination, sometimes they are a little bit overlapping, but they are nevertheless different. One is to reach out to society and can be different levels or layers of the society. It can be the dissemination. The other one is about transfer of knowledge and making knowledge grow and making the knowledge available. And the other one, the exploitation, is to use in an effective way the project results in terms of making a difference. And of course, because of that, you have to focus in different types of actions and different ways of doing. You have different action plans, and you have to have in mind what is your target audience. So now I have here two projects. As you know, I'm in a postdoctoral fellowship, so they are monopartner projects, and I know that you're going to have some other examples of projects that will be bigger, but just for you to understand that very small little projects, monopartner projects, projects sometimes of 24 months, of 36 months, they also have the obligation of communicating and disseminating and exploiting if they can. And this goes beyond the life of the project. So these obligations don't stop the day the project starts, they continue. And they continue for 2, 3, 4 years. And how a very small project can do something that is really nice in terms of communication. So this one, which is in engineering, you have here the link to the website. They, in any case, did a very nice website. And here you see, so it's to understand the relationship between the autonomy, intelligence, and connectivity, and and their effects on the design processes. And this is everywhere, is being used everywhere nowadays. And they would like to illustrate the shortcomings of today's traditional engineering practices, and to come into to have ideas for an innovative framework and a set of tools that can build human-centered sustainable CPS. So this project up to now, up to in fact, it was a global fellowship in Stanford, and it stopped after 2 years of the researcher being in Stanford in United States, because she secured then funding to come back to Europe, but not in the beneficiary, as she was signing a contract with someone else. The project was ended. So in 24 months, she did all these things: 3 publications in open access, but in high level journals. She participated in enormous amounts of conferences, where online, because there was COVID times. So many times the researchers saying, because of COVID, we couldn't do many things. There were other ways of doing. There are other ways of doing. I'm communicating with you. I'm doing this while sitting at my home in Brussels, and you are, lucky you, in Córdoba, in the sun, I suppose. So there are many ways of doing things. Then she did lots of outreach activities, and one is the Pride in Science Technology. And this is something that is very interesting. Another one was a webinar on how can women become global change makers. As you know, there are always these problems with less women in science and so on. She was also fellow of the week and many other things. And then there is another project which is wanted to explore, and this was a 24-month project only, how urban communities in social housing can contribute to the implementation of a circular economy in cities. And this project has been very successful. They produced this card game prototype on social innovation for circular economy that was developed, and this was promoted. This promotes societal knowledge and actions for behavioral change, and this was presented in Science is Wonderful, which is organized by the European Commission, as you know. They also applied for the Bauhaus Festival, and in the Bauhaus Festival, they involve visitors in playing the Circular Families card game. And these on top of the conferences, on top of the press releases, of the website. You have also here the website and all the other actions and the publications that they did. So, I mean, I stop here. The links of the websites are here. I'm not really going to show. I hope this was okay. So, if you want, I'm open to any questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Maria, for this overview from a top-down overview from how the science communication fits within the duties of, in this case, the research funding within the European Commission. I will move on to the next presenter so that we can have a short round of Q&A at the very end. The next presenter is Sybille Luhmann. I hope she's online. Let's see if she's online.
Good afternoon, Córdoba.
Oh, hello, hello, Sybille.
Hello.
Hello, Sybille. So let me introduce Sybille. Sybille Luhmann is policy officer at the DG Education, Youth, Sport and Culture, where she supports the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions, the team in feeding the excellent research of the MSCA fellows to a wide audience. She does so by coordinating the outreach initiative Science is Wonderful, but she works also on the European Researchers' Night and Researchers at School. This rather new project, it's more recent compared to the other ones. Sybille, thank you very much for accepting our invitation. The floor is yours.
Thanks so much for having me, Gian Maria, and thanks for allowing us to switch on from Brussels. It's nice to get some digital sunshine this way at least. I will try to share my screen now. I hope you can see the presentation in a minute. Give me a thumbs up if you can see it.
We can.
Perfect. Thanks, Maria. Good. So, as Gian Maria said, I would like to talk about the MSCA experience in science communication that many of you are aware of already, but I thought I'd give some practical examples to make it interesting. So I wanted to briefly present some individual experiences. There are, of course, many from our MSCA fellows. Then to briefly talk about Science is Wonderful, because we have great initiatives coming up. And then the European Researchers' Night, and linked to it, of course, researchers at schools, before very briefly talking about the next steps. So what are some of the individual experiences? And again, I can just emphasize this. These are real highlights. I could pick so many more, because we have wonderful fellows who do incredible work, as Maria has already shown. So here's one that I like. It's by Dr. Lena Adrian Blasco, and she developed a strategic board game called Backterfield, which promotes microbiology to young audiences or just game nerds. And I think this is worth highlighting because she really went full circle in the development of this game, even presenting it at one of the biggest Spanish game workshops to test it with professional gamers and see if it works. So how does it work? I have included a link in this video so that when the presentation is shared, you can see for yourself in more detail how the game works, even order it online in case you have little microbiologists at home. But in essence, it's a strategic board game of 2 to 4 players, and your bacteria multiply exponentially throughout the game, but so do those of your opponents. So through playing cards, you can infect, weaken, or even kill your opponent's bacteria while growing your own and increasing their capabilities. So this, together with a little research booklet, tries to explain a little bit some of the elements of bacteria and microbiology to a wide audience. And this would be an example of gamification. Then we, of course, also have storytelling. And here I wanted to highlight Once Upon the Future, which is a collaborative project by 6 MSCA fellows. And they wrote a little children's book called Once Upon the Future, which you can order on Amazon if you like. And it tells 6 short stories of everyday adventures that changed the world. So we have, it uses the genre of magical realism. So it's a very fantastic world that invites children, but also anyone who feels like joining a little scientific journey to explore academic research and its impact on society. To give you an example, we have Alma, who tries to save a crooked beech forest from destruction. We have a big-nosed carrot, which is looking for a compost heap. We have Olivia, who learns the joy of street play through a new classmate. We have Aunt Bloom and her mysterious tales of cosmic mariners. We also have a magic portal, the Wood Wide Web, with this, which lets you into the secrets of the past. Now, this is a story, I think, from a Portuguese researcher, and it's a little bit about the dangers of having too much eucalyptus in forests because it can create forest fires, which can wreak havoc on the environment. And she finds a little oak tree and tries to protect it. And we have Jamie, who creates a fashion show with his grandmother's traditional linen. So it's a little bit of a cultural tale together with an environmental aspect of recycling, upcycling. So this is an example of storytelling. I think this book was quite a success, and it's also just extremely cute. So I wanted to promote it in case you don't have the right birthday present for your family yet. But of course, we also are digital. So here I wanted to highlight a YouTube channel called Yummy Physics, which the scripts are written by Dr. Marianne Roulet. And you can discover anything that you've always wondered about physics, especially when it comes to food. So I really like that my 2 favorite worlds collide in this YouTube channel. For example, why is milk white? And they try to recreate milk through its different components, but then it's not white. So why is it actually white? They also look at postmodern chocolate or a beer with no head. So lots of interesting videos, and you can see they're quite successful. If you want to contribute to the success and procrastinate a little bit on a Friday afternoon, I fully invite you to look at Yummy Physics on YouTube. So these are just 3 examples to show a little bit the breadth of our fellows and what they managed to do. We have videos, games, storytelling, and we have so much more. Now to a more organized format. So for all the fellows who might be interested in communicating their research, might not just quite know how, might not want to set up their own YouTube channel or create their own board game completely, we have Science is Wonderful. And Science is Wonderful consists at the moment of 3 elements. The first is the science fair. This is where we actually invite the researchers to come to Brussels and to showcase their research. Then we have online activities. This was newly set up just 2 years ago as a result of the pandemic to give teachers across Europe access to wonderful online resources that our researchers have developed for the classroom. and then the competition that we launched last year and that finished early this year to create even more online activities. So let me go over each one just very briefly. First, we have the science fair. This year it will take place on 16th and 17th of March, so in just 3 weeks here in Brussels. And we're very excited to host it again. And we're extremely grateful that over 100 researchers, most of them MSCA, are coming from across Europe to showcase and celebrate their research with over 4,000 pupils from around Belgium and even some neighboring countries. How will they do that? They will have presentation, hands-on experiments, games, quizzes, and much more. You can find out about it on our website. We will upload an interactive map of the exhibition very soon so you can have a browse around. But I wanted to give you a sneak peek already. So what can you expect? Again, just some highlights. In total, we have 43 projects, so a lot of different turf to cover, but here are some elements. We, for example, have Trace the Trash, which is a project that teaches kids how to find microplastics in public water and how to make sure that there's an environmental consciousness to take care of our oceans. So this is Keep the Sea Free of Debris. We also have mini archaeologists. So here they will have a tiny archaeological site and they will learn about digging through different surfaces and finding treasures hidden from the past and learning a little bit about human history this way. These little archaeologists will also be able to recreate a destroyed porcelain to see what it might have looked like. We will have jelly brains. So we have one researcher who will bring little jelly brains to explain the neurology and different parts of the brain to our young visitors. We will also have self-healing cement. So this is to show that some cement can crack and heal by itself through micro. Oh God, I'm sorry. I used to be a researcher, but not an actual scientist. So, but I think it's self-healing microbes. And then later on, you can correct me if I'm wrong. And in 3 weeks, I will learn more about it, and then I will be able to tell you in case you don't know. But of course, these are little bacteria on the surface of the cement that allow it to heal a little bit over time. And kids will be able to break cement and then look at it heal through a microscope. We will also have large modules of DNA to show how what our DNA consists of and how it can be arranged. And we will have one of the largest crystals in the world. It's 260 kilograms heavy, and it's industry produced. And here our researchers will show not just how crystals are produced, but also how artificial intelligence can be used to make sure to find the different elements in the crystal that are not entirely perfect, and how this then can be used later on in different industrial processes, also for the creation of phones, etc. We also have the Science is Wonderful activities. So our science fair is fantastic, but of course it's only local, so it can only be in one city. But we're also going Europe-wide or even beyond Europe through our Science is Wonderful activities. These, at the moment, we have 25, and they're developed by our MSCA researchers. And you can filter them by subject, age, and language to make sure you find something that works for your classroom. Here you can also see the Yummy Physics channel being promoted again, so clearly we are big fans. But 25 is not a lot, so if you did not find what you needed, then we have good news. We're going to create even more content, and we're doing that through a competition that was launched last year, and it closed on the 9th of January. It allowed MSCA researchers to match with teachers across Europe. So we had a big online portal, which I like to compare to an academic Tinder. And we had, I think, around 500 participants in total. So teachers really from across Europe signing up, completing their online profile, and researchers signing up even from beyond Europe. And then they try to match based on their interests and what topics they research or teach. And together they developed a proposal for a new learning resource. So that way we could guarantee that on the one hand, it really has a scientific application that allows the teachers to bring science to the classroom as it is currently conducted in the field, in the lab, in front of the computer. But on the other hand, it would also ensure that whatever we produce is relevant to the classroom and that teachers help us understand what their needs are. So this collaboration was very successful. We received over 100 proposals, and in the end, we selected 3 winners. You can read more about them online on our website. The 3 winners we will produce professionally over the coming months and upload on our online catalog, and we will also translate it into all EU languages so that everyone can have access to them. To give you a quick overview, now the text here is very small on purpose because you don't have to read through it, but the first is a biology escape room, and here pupils have to solve different puzzles in order to be able to open a treasure chest, and then they get a little prize. We also have Galileo XR, which is augmented reality. And here it's more about the introduction to the scientific method for children of various ages. So they're using microbits for a digital treasure hunt. They also have a small XR or augmented reality application for the phone to engage with different quizzes. And they also have really basic paper-based quizzes to decipher Caesar's cipher. And then finally, we have a crime scene investigation where the teacher can reproduce different blood types by mixing vinegar, water, and milk. And then the kids have to find out who is behind a crime by doing blood cell analysis. And this is to give kids a little bit of an insight into blood analysis, but also to show what a life as a criminologist could look like later on. So it's communicating scientific outputs, but also stimulating curiosity, making sure people see that science can be for them, and giving them access to this wonderful world. We also have the European Researchers' Night. You're probably familiar with it, so I will be quick. It's every last Friday in September, and in 2022, it was hosted in 26 countries, and it received over 1.5 million visitors, which are pre-COVID numbers, which we're very proud of. So it means that despite the pandemic, we managed to go back to the original numbers and the original outreach. So what is the European Researchers' Night? I've collected some pictures from the one that I visited in northern Germany, but of course, it's extremely diverse because each organizer organizes it themselves. So we have 26 projects, and they do fantastic things. And each project is run very, very differently with unique ideas to make sure that they reach their target audience in their cultural setting the best they can. So these are just some examples from Germany. Here, there was a collaboration with a design team and a biology team, and they developed tea bags. And in the tea bags, they had little stories about antibiotic resistance to inform a wide public about it, but also to maybe give a topic for discussion as people drink their tea. You know, why not talk about antibiotic resistance rather than the weather? There was also an escape game based on chemistry. So here they had to solve different puzzles in order to be able to escape the room. There were mini robots that children could build, and then they would race against each other. And there were experiments, mostly outside, in order to make sure that nothing happened. So some small explosions, as Maria mentioned, that we traditionally associate with science were also represented. And there was also comic books. I think they call these serious comics. And I like this one because it says scientists are always kind of very special people. So it has a good sense of humor, a good sense of, I should say, Northern German humor. So it might not be for everyone. Then we have researchers at schools. As was already mentioned, this is a relatively new initiative. It was launched last year with the European Year of Youth. And it is combined with the European Researchers' Night, as in the organizers of the European Researchers' Night also organize researchers at schools. And it's an additional layer to make sure that really we can target different audiences. And these are projects that do exactly what the title says. They bring researchers to schools, and sometimes they also bring schools to the researchers. So sometimes they also organize lab visits. And in 2022, of course, it was again in 26 member states. We had seen that there were presentation, hands-on experiments, visits to labs, games, discussions, role-playing. And I invite you to browse through all of the projects. They're fantastic, especially for your own country, because all of these projects will run for 2 years, which means this year they're repeated. And researchers at schools, unlike the European Researchers' Night, runs throughout the year. So you might be able to engage even now if you wanted to, depending on the project. So make sure to look it up and see what's available in your region in case you're curious. And also, of course, many of you, or probably nearly all of you, are researchers yourselves. You can get involved. So you can reach out to the organizers and ask if maybe you can visit a school. I'm sure they're always happy to collaborate. One thing that I should mention is that for this initiative, we have set a target of reaching out to 2,400 schools and 224,000 pupils over the course of 2 years. Now, we're still missing some data from last year because some projects are late in reporting, but I can say that we already reached out to over 2,000 schools and over to 130,000 pupils in just last year. So it looks like we will easily achieve the goals set out here. And that's also what we hear from the project organizers, this general enthusiasm for this new initiative, and that it works extremely well, and that schools are very grateful for having this this access to science as well. Now, very briefly for the next steps, I thought I would just talk rather than write. But what we see is a little bit a two-way trend. So for us, what could be interesting is a little bit, I like to call this back to the future. So we had 2 years that were organized very digitally, especially when reaching a young audience, which was homeschooled or had access to online teaching. And this has developed an array of wonderful online formats. Here we see that these are great and should be preserved, and maybe we can learn from them, but we need to make sure that we also include experiences from before the pandemic, that we go back to physical events, and that we recognize the importance of real life encounters to ensure that the sparks really do fly between research and the wider society. And then we have I think it's important to move maybe a little bit from science communication, and Maria mentioned science communication, dissemination, exploitation. I would like to add to that science engagement, and maybe this is hair splitting, but to me there is a slight difference between science communication, which can be very one way, and science engagement, which means you're really engaging with the other party and you're also taking something back. And this can be done through interactions, so through experiments and meetings and workshops, but it can also be done through citizen science. And we see here a growing demand for citizen science on both ends. We see it both from our researchers and from local communities. And so we had, for example, the plastic pirates, where children were encouraged to collect data for researchers to analyze later on about microplastics in water. This is a great example for citizen science data collection. I personally would be even happier if we had fantastic examples about co-design of experiments, for example. So really going that next step, that would be fantastic. But I should say these are just some initial thoughts on the topic because I was asked to reflect about it. We would be more than happy to also listen to your ideas and to get a little bit of a brainstorming going on what could be changed in the MSCA to make science communication, science outreach even more efficient in the future, and how to incentivize our researchers to engage with a wide public, how to make sure that even though sometimes their contracts are relatively short, as Maria mentioned, to make sure that on top of all of this research, they are motivated to take part in this extremely important task that they also have on top of their research, which of course is the #1 priority.
Thank you very much, Sybille.
From me, thanks a lot again for having me, and I look forward to the discussion later.
Thank you very much for this, Sybille. So the point of view of RIA, the point of view and with examples, real examples from Marie Skłodowska-Curie projects. And now let's move to take a higher point of view, if hope that it's the right approach, the right way to putting it, with Anna Maria Fleetwood. You can, I think, go to the stage, right?
I need a microphone.
It's there. There is a mic.
Does it work?
Yeah.
Okay, because
yeah.
when they tested.
They didn't. Okay. Hello. Let's see if the mic on.
Does it work? Yeah, it works.
So why I'm saying that, let's conclude by moving on a higher point of view, because Anna Maria Fleetwood represents the Swedish Research Council, and she has a very long experience in science communication. She has directed and established some very successful projects, including the Forum on Science Communication, which is an event in Sweden that gathers together over 400 experts on the topic. But she's also the chair of the Task Force on Science Communication of Science Europe. Science Europe is a kind of meta-organization that gathers together the funding agencies, the different national funding agencies. I hope I explained that synthetically well. And they produced last year a white paper on science communication. So this is a white paper from the funding agencies in a way. It's very interesting to see what they see as problems, pros, cons, future. Maria, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation.
Thank you for having me. I wanted to start with thanking Science Europe, who actually, when we presented that we wanted to make a white paper or a position statement, said, yes, it's time to do it. And I've been working, as Gian Maria said, for a very long time, and I have seen how it has shifted in science communication, the attitude, and we've also seen lots of wonderful examples here, what you can do as a researcher. What we have not seen is how can we reward you, how can we incentivize you, and I think this is really what has to be the next level. So together with the group, I was writing a position paper or a white paper, and we were using the same sort of format that they do for all the other positions papers. And I think it's really important to really understand that the viewpoint or the standpoint that we took was that science communication is part of excellent research. It's not something that you do before or you do after. So it's really part of the process, and also it is part of making excellent science. So those statements, position papers, are built up with a preamble, with a vision, and with principles, and then a framework. And as I said, it was the very, very first statement, and I'm really happy that they gave us the opportunity to do it. So we started with a vision, science.
1 second. Ahora. Bueno,
Okay.
put it where you were.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we wanted to see. Some of the prior presenters has talked about the context, And I mean, with the COVID, we could see actually that the demand for science and science communication were actually larger than the asset. We didn't have so many researchers that could take all the places to do the science communication. But the vision really was to put science communication in this sort of system of excellent research, that it considers science communication as important part of the research culture, that it's once again it's a part of the culture, and also of course it informs and engages citizens in research and develop public understanding of research. Also, we will touch upon that it's not just the sort of lay audience or the general public, but it also includes politicians and provides timely. It has to provide timely evidence to the social challenges that we've been standing for. And I mean, just as we have been talking about the COVID, and now we have a war going on. So it has to be part of the local and the national debate, and it also has to get through to the policy making, and to sort of also to stimulate for future support. I was really happy to hear the word passion so many times, because I think I'm not a researcher, but I think it's really important that you who are researchers really show your passion. Why do you actually do this? What sort of drivers do you have? And why do you think it's so interesting? So then we came down to principles, and we said that it has to recognize the communication and interaction with different audiences, and also it has to include researchers with stakeholders, with citizens, and also, as I said in the beginning, at all different stages, not just in the beginning or in the end. But also it has to promote the importance of and provide incentives. And I think that since I started, this is whenever I talk to you as researchers, you say we need the incentives. And also I think this is slowly now changing, because we're getting those kind of white paper and position papers, and also with the work done on the Córdoba, where research assessment is looked upon, and where one recognizes that it cannot just be how many publications you have been doing, because as a researcher you do a lot of different things. I'm not going to read all this text, you can have it, it's online. So then we had we were discussing how do we achieve this vision, and what kind of leverage and resources is required, because I think also this is the other thing that is important, that not everyone is sort of born a good speaker or a writer, but you need to be trained, and we have seen this also in different surveys, that researchers really need training. And I think it's also important to recognize that training is something that that really empowers you as a researcher to do more outreach activities. And also, of course, in the landscape that we are, media is extremely important. So then it ends with some framework actions. And we say that strengthening the role of research institutions in science communication, and this is now what we're going to try to work with and work on. We will try to create the pan-European opportunities and also to build partnership with science communication stakeholders. And also developing institutional tools. I'm coming back to this, that training is needed. I've trained quite a few researchers during the year, and one can really see that it makes a change, and they feel more at ease and more empowered if they have been trained. And also try to employ new and diverse forms of knowledge communication. And I think that there's so much happening now, and there's so many new concepts, and I think we just have to try to see how we can develop new ways of communication. So this is the sort of position paper. It was a short presentation. What I want to do is to end with a picture from the Swedish Research Council, because what I heard today was a lot of different terms, science communication, public engagement, stakeholders involvement, and so on. At the Swedish Research Council, we are talking about 3 different forms of science communication, and they are all very often used in parallel. So the first one is information, and we have been talking today about different writing articles and so on. Then the other one sort of is involving more and more two-way communication is the dialogue, which can be science cafe and so on. And then the third one, who is co-creation, where actually the stakeholders or the end users has an influence on the result and are in the process together with you researchers. And for example, an example here would be citizen science. So this is the statement, very briefly, and it's online. You can read it on Science Europe's webpage. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anna Maria, also for being so sharp with the time slot. Thank you. I'm sure we all appreciate it. Before moving on to a quick round of Q&A, I'll wish to hear a quick comment from Rosa Arias. I will introduce Rosa more properly this afternoon in the afternoon session, but the idea here is to have a quick comment of what we've seen so far, what we listened so far from an organization that works in science communication and citizen science. So what is their point of view on the institutional perspective and activities, and this evening we will do the reverse. The other way around, Rosa and others will speak, and then Anna Maria will provide her comments.
Thank you, Gian Maria. I will try to be quick, and I would like to be the bridge towards our session in the afternoon, trying to wrap up a little bit what you all said from the point of view of the practitioner. We start by listening to Maria that mentioned that science communication is moving really quickly, and we think that we can use this change to turn into an opportunity. Of course, our research are influencing the life of citizens, and if we do communication and dissemination, we will have a higher impact, and we will bring science closer to society. But this requires, as Gian Maria mentioned, a set of skills and competencies that are key for translating, because it's not about only publishing papers, but we need to use different formats, channels, and messages to reach our citizens or other stakeholders, such as policymakers, if we want to have an impact. So to do that, we need training to do this translation, but also we need recognition, as Ana Maria mentioned. So because this is time-consuming, it's not easy. We need to acquire this new set of skills, and we need time to do that, not only knowledge. And this is something that we really require to do that. Also, as we are involved in citizen science, this requires the active participation of citizens in the research with co-creation processes, for example, as Ana Maria mentioned. And this also offers a unique opportunity to use different types of communication, because citizens, when they participate, they get involved, they get new knowledge, but they also get excited, and there is a lot of passion, and they become science communicators themselves. So we are starting a wheel here of communicating science that can help us also in this era of the infodemia to fight fake news, promote critical thinking, and all these type of things that we need to work in. Sybille mentioned this science engagement, and this afternoon I will present some experiences on how we do that, because it's not only about communicating science where scientists are, like, for example, in the European Researchers' Night, of course, it's a huge success, but we can use other spaces, informal spaces, to reach our citizens. For example, festivals, music festivals, or social festivities in neighborhoods, in museums, etc., to bring science to the streets. This is one of the next steps that we can do, and start using co-creation to do this science together. So my message for you is be creative. There are many ways to do this type of communication and dissemination of your research. You have the passion, you have the results, you just need to bring them out. And also it offers an opportunity for these behavioral changes that we all need in this time of crisis, the climate emergency or the COVID. We need the whole society to be with us, and we all need to collaborate to overcome this crisis. Also, there are, Sybille mentioned, different strategies such as gamification, storytelling. You can use podcasts, YouTube videos, Instagram, TikTok, even if you are brave enough or funny. And there are many opportunities out there. Also, schools are really nice to get the new scientists of the future, and we can act as reference also the women to overcome this gender gap that we have in science. And we have a huge opportunity, basically, just to end with, but this needs time, we need resources, we need knowledge, and to do all this we need the recognition in our curriculum. So let's discuss more about this afternoon.
Thank you, Rosa. That's really on the point. Any questions? Let's see. I think I'll be the ballet.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, speakers, for the wonderful introduction on communications, which I believe is a very important skill and tool for researchers. I am a researcher of the Mercury scheme. And we are, as researchers, always reminded that dissemination, we saw the difference at the very beginning, is very important. So we disseminate a lot because we have to publish to get recognition, to proceed with our thesis or our research program. Communication, on the other hand, is a bit mistreated from us. And we saw that we lack a bit of understanding and knowledge that it is important, but also we lack the skills. So I want to know from everyone, basically, because everyone touched a bit on this, what are the current actions or the proposed actions to fill these two gaps in the perceived importance on communication and the skill set of researchers in communication. It was a bit long.
Thank you very much. Your name, so that Giuseppe. Who wishes to provide a comment on her answer? Anna Maria.
Well, I can try to answer one of your question, how it changed the perception of science communication. I leave it to someone else, but the Swedish Research Council, we actually, for 2 years ago, we started, we put together an expert group to see if we could get science communication into the doctoral studies on a national level as a strategy. And because we have the mandate from the Swedish government to coordinate science communication in Sweden. So together with this expert group, we were working for 2 years and we came up with a framework with 3 different models. And very shortly, it starts with the sort of more reflecting model, where you ask yourself, what is my role as a researcher? What is it? What can I do with the harassment? Ethical things. What is knowledge transfer, and what kind of role is the academia playing in the society, in this shifting society that we're living in? The next model was sort of more, how do you make a communication plan? How do you look at different logic, because the logic of media and the logic of an academic is totally different. So this is more looking into those things and try to understand how it works. How do you actually sort of frame your how do you frame your what you want to say to that group that you are actually aiming, your target group. And then the third one was just hands-on. How do you do an elevator pitch? How do you write an article? And they were writing articles, and they had one of the best journalists in Sweden who was sort of given the tips on how to do it better. And so it was really hands-on and doing sort of writing and performing, and so this has now been out, and we piloted one, and there's another one going on now. And actually, I'm traveling around both in Sweden and in Europe to talk about this, because it has sort of come to knowledge, and it seems like people are really interested to see how you can get it on a more structural, strategic, high level, on a national level in different countries. So that I tried to answer one of your questions, and that is to really get it into the curriculum of the PhD students.
Thank you, Anna
If
Maria.
if I may, I can also answer, Gian Maria. That's Maria.
Yeah, super.
Yeah, super quick, because Giuseppe, I understand. I'm going to the point about communication. First of all, because that's what you're asking. That's an important part, as I said before, and as the other said. You know about dissemination, communication. You don't know much. There are some opportunities, and Sybille spoke about some of the opportunities. Which is engaging to go to the researchers' night, for instance, which is a fantastic fair. And you bring your research to the citizens, to the kids, but to the great parents. It's very nice to go to researchers' night, because you see the whole families, from the little kids to the grandparents and the parents and the dogs, just going around and engaging with the science and with the scientists. That's one way. Another way is to engage with the schools of your region, and to try and to, because as a person, as a researcher, I think it's important that you start thinking and you start trying to translate things in a language that even if you're speaking to your kids or the kids of your family or of your friends, you can more or less explain to them what you are doing, and everybody understands. So it starts with the frame of mind of the researchers, first of all. Secondly, in your projects, you have a budget, and you have a budget to engage in dissemination and exploitation, but also in outreach activities and in communication. If you are inside some good organizations, normally they have media people working there, so you also work with them. There are lots of places where you can ask for help. You can ask for help for your POs, your project officers also. They can guide you a little bit. You can ask for help via DGAC. DGAC has a good communication team. You could see the fabulous things Sybille was able to show you. So I think this is very important. And now just one little thing, Gian Maria. You know, I'm on leave and I have to leave soon. So if someone would like to have a question that is more directed to me, if it could be now, then I would in 10 minutes I will be leaving the session, if you don't mind. Okay?
Okay. Even we will leave, I think even sooner. We are already almost 20 minutes over the time that was of the session. So
Yeah.
there are any other questions? Okay, there are two questions. I hope they are quick. Which one is for Maria? Is there one? No. So there are no questions addressed to you, Maria, and of the two that are raised their hand. Let's start with you then.
I'll stay still for 5 minutes and then I'll leave then. And thanks to everybody. Okay? And good luck for everything.
My name is Ahsan Makbul, and I'm one of the Marie Curie Fellow that based in Córdoba right now. And I welcome you, all of you, in this beautiful city. And so my question is very broader. Maybe it's conflicting with some of your point of view, because today we are talking about the science communication, and science communication is always about engaging people. Science is for people to creating more comfortable environment for our human society, for if you talk about sustainability in terms of. So the question is fundamental. What is the basics need or the fundamental question scientists should discover or evidence should produce in the research? First is to produce or create the evidence that or generate data that can help the society. Is that the fundamental thing scientists should do, or should more engage in the communication of science? Isn't these two things deviating the scientist from their fundamentals job? Isn't the job of science communication should we leave to the professionals so that the scientists could focus more on the research and they could produce more innovative way for the sustainability? Yeah, thank you.
Hello. Who wishes to answer? I don't know. Rosa. Okay.
I think it's a matter of collaboration and of changing the mindset, because researchers do not have the whole knowledge. And the research question can even be co-created with the society because we are researching for them. So we need to be sure that our research is aligned. So you can start communicating from the beginning to see if your research is, well addressing the societal challenges, and collaborate with them from the beginning. And of course, you need to establish a relationship with the professionals, because you would need to do that. And it's also a matter of communicating well. So it's a matter of collaboration.
Thank you very much. And the last question. Okay, let me move across the room.
Thank you. I just started my Marie Curie project, and for the last 6 months, I'm supposed to collaborate in a non-academic institution. More precisely, we would like to have some impact in policy making. I see that there are many activities to engage public school students, but I'm not aware of activities to engage politicians or policymakers or people who take decisions. I'm not aware, maybe there are, but I would be interested in your opinion, if there would be any benefit from organizing this kind of event. So also the policy makers, they get engaged and they try to understand our science in the same way as we try them to understand our science.
I think this is really for Anna Maria, probably, for the point of view.
Thank you. Lately I have seen so many articles about science advice, and also what you can find very easily on the internet now is how to write a policy brief. And I think that when as I also said that when we talk about science communication, it's not just sort of a wider public, it's also politicians. And so, I mean, I think that there is a lot of interest now to get evidence into the politicians making, and I also think that the interest from you researchers has also increased. So I think it's a really good opportunity if we, myself as a practitioner and you as researchers, really can work with trying to bear a line with policymakers. And also there is a lot of countries who has pairing schemes to really sort of researchers go into the government and the politicians comes out in the academia to better understand, because this is two totally different cultures, politician and the researcher. So it really, you need to get to know the culture and the language, more the culture and how it works. For a researcher, the deadline can be 4 years. For a politician, it can be like 2 minutes. So it's a total different sort of mindset that you have to take care of and to try to understand. But I hope I answered your question.
Maria, can I just
Sybille, please
something?
Go ahead.
And I feel like I have to repent a little bit for my far too long presentation by trying to be very short now. But just very briefly, combining the first question of how to change how we perceive science communication and the second question of why not leave it to the experts, I wanted to add just one element next to all of the wonderful answers that were already given, which is if you engage in science communication, there's a level of abstraction to it that will help you create new bridges to other ideas as well. So it's not just beneficial to you because it's part of your grant agreement or because it's nice to communicate with schools. It's also beneficial, just like teaching is, to sometimes break something down, take a step back, and it allows you to create new connections as a researcher. And that can also be very valuable. And maybe that will also help us slowly change the perception of science communication and give people an added incentive of engaging in it. And very briefly on the question of skills and policy making, I would just like to mention 2 things. The first is, for Science is Wonderful, as well as for our satellite events at ESOF, we always also organize communication workshops. So if you're interested, really do get engaged. We're also happy to train skills and make sure that we make the most out of your research and make sure that it gets heard by as many people as possible. And then the second is, how do we engage with policymakers? I would just very briefly like to mention an initiative that was launched, I think, last year by the MSCA unit, which is a matchmaking event they are co-organizing with the Joint Research Center, which allows MSCA fellows to match with people from industry, from public organizations, for their 6 months add-on to their postdoctoral fellowship in case they do follow this track. So just for you to know that there are some options within the MSCA as well. But of course, we're always happy to learn more. So I'm very grateful for the additional insights received today, and many thanks.
Thank you very much, Sybille, for this. I think it's also the perfect way to conclude our session. So first of all, let me thank Maria Carvalho Diaz, Sybille Luhmann, Anna Maria Fleetwood, and Rosa Arias for sharing with us their knowledge, expertise, and their ideas. And we heard concepts like trust, what we gain, research gain, co-creation, And so there are all different sides of a very complex, challenging, but also enriching area, the area that is science communication. Let me just leave with this, something that Rosa said. She, at one point she said, take science into the street. And that is the second part of today. It's something, it's very revolutionary in a way, sounds like it, but it's the second part of the session this afternoon. So thank you very much to all the speakers, and see you in the next session.
Thank you. Enjoy your lunch.
Bye-bye.